Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I think it's text 15 of the 3rd chapter, Canto 5. Right? We're going to do the word-to-word meaning also. Yat, because, uhavava, indeed, tava, your, puna, again, adabhrakarta, O Lord who performs many activities, iha, here in this arena of sacrifice, Samahuta, invited, Tatra, therefore, Artadhyam, who aspire to fulfill material desires, Mandanam, not very intelligent, Na, of us, Tat, that, Yat, which, Devahelanam, disrespect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Deva Deva, Lord of Lords. Arhasi, please. Samyena, because of your equipoised position. Sarvan, everything. Prativodhum, tolerate. Avidusham, of us who are all ignorant. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Jai. O Lord, you perform many wonderful activities. Our only aim was to acquire a son by performing this great sacrifice. Therefore, our intelligence is not very sharp. We are not experienced in ascertaining life's goal. By inviting you to this negligible sacrifice for some material motive, we have certainly committed a great offense at your lotus feet. Therefore, O Lord of Lords, please excuse our offense because of your causeless mercy and equal mind. Purport: the priests were certainly unhappy to have called the Supreme Lord from Vaikuntha for such an insignificant reason. A pure devotee never wants to see the Lord unnecessarily. The Lord is engaged in various activities, and the pure devotee does not want to see him whimsically for his own sense gratification. The pure devotee simply depends on the Lord's mercy, and when the Lord is pleased, he can see him face to face. The Lord is seen even by demigods like Lord Brahma the Lord is unseen even by demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. By calling on the Supreme Lord, the priests of Nabhi Maharaj proved themselves unintelligent. Nonetheless, the Lord came out of his causeless mercy. All of them therefore wanted to be excused by the Lord. Worship of the Supreme Lord for material gain is not approved by authorities. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 16, Chatur vidha bhajante mam, jana sukritino arjuna, arto jignasur atharti gyani cha bharatar shabha. Quote, O best among the Bharatas, Arjuna, 4 kinds of pious men render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. In quote, initiation into bhakti begins when one is in a distressed condition or in want of money, or when one is inquisitive to understand the absolute truth. Nonetheless, people who approach the Supreme Lord in this way are not actually devotees. They are accepted as pious, sukritina, due to their inquiring about the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not knowing the various activities and engagements of the Lord, such people unnecessarily disturb the Lord for material gain. However, the Lord is so kind that even though disturbed, he fulfills the desires of such beggars. The pure devotee is anyabhilashita shunya. He has no motive behind his worship. He is not conducted by the influence of Maya in the form of karma or gyan. The pure devotee is always prepared to execute the order of the Lord without personal consideration. The Ritvija, the priest at the sacrifice, knew very well the distinction between karma and bhakti. And because they considered themselves under the influence of karma, fruit of activity, they begged the Lord's pardon. They knew that the Lord had been invited to come for some paltry reason. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Agyantamidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadhati Swapatantikam Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyarevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So the priests are continuing their prayers to the Supreme Lord, which has a very strong element of regret, because they desire to see the Supreme Lord for their own personal sense gratification. And to do so is disrespectful, actually. Although we generally don't think to go to the Lord and ask Him for material desires, ask Him to fulfill material desires is disrespectful. But actually the priests here are expressing that actually it's disrespectful to pray to you for fulfilling of material benedictions. Although out of your kind mercy you have come and obliged us in appearing and fulfilling our material desires, for us to request such a thing from you, our desire to see you, to have such a request fulfilled is actually disrespectful. And the word that's used actually in the Sanskrit, we read it, Deva Helanam, disrespect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a pretty far out concept that the Bhagavatam is kind of presenting, because generally in the normal materialistic way of thinking of religion, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, right? I do some dharma, some religious activities to God so I can get some artha, right? Some economic development. And what's the point of artha? So I can enjoy sense gratification without God, right? It's like, thank you, God, for it's like when a kid goes to his parents, can I get $20? You know, and he might pretend to be very submissive and pleasing. He might even do something for his mother, like wash her plate, and then ask her for the $10. And then after he gets the $10, what does he do? See you later, Mom, right? Nothing to do with Mom and everything for sense gratification. And the priests are pointing out here that that's disrespectful. But this is a normal concept of religion that most of the living entities are working with. But Srimad Bhagavatam is telling us such an attitude is disrespectful. Deva Helanam. And the idea is something like, I think it could be easily comprehended. It is something like if we were to look upon the opposite sex with lusty eyes, thinking that the opposite sex is simply an object of my enjoyment. Like sometimes young men, they think that let me get married because I have sex desire, right? Like this is like the only concept that usually is working in the mind. Oh, I have sex desire, so let me get married. So then their whole concept, well, what's your concept of a woman then? Well, one who can fulfill my sex desire, right? And she can cook nicely also, right? This problem is mentioned in the Bhagavatam in many places. In fact, I think in the Pramabhu you were telling me of some persons who were telling you like that, maybe in college or something. Their whole concept of a woman was someone who can cook nicely for them and give them good sex life. So naturally, if you look upon the opposite sex with such a mentality, then that's disrespectful to the woman, right? We would say that's disrespectful, right? If like a Mataji walks into the room and one of the Prabhus is like, then we say that's Prabhu, that's disrespectful, right? Obviously it's disrespectful. I often share a story. One of our devotees, Bhakta Jerry, his brother was doing some work for the temple, And he was not a devotee. He was favorable. He really liked devotees, but he wasn't a devotee. He was very materialistic. And he came to, I shared this many times, he came to the temple one day after coming from the Gap store downtown Chicago, and apparently one mother was there, not dressed so much like a mother, but dressed like something else. And so he was just staring at her. And so she asked him, "What are you looking at?" And he said, "You." He very point blankly told, and he was telling the devotees like this, and naturally we think, well, that's disrespectful. His point was, she was dressed like that, I have the right to look. If she has the right to dress like that, I have the right to look. But a more cultural person would think that is disrespectful. Because a woman, in the context I'm giving, is not simply meant as an object of our enjoyment. A woman is actually a personality. Outside of what we think they can provide for us, the woman is a personality, she has her own desires, etc. Right? And many times that isn't given consideration. Sometimes young boys and young girls become attracted to each other. I find Facebook is a pretty good, effective method of nourishing the attraction, establishing the connection, and nourishing the attachment. Anyway, we hear such things in the recent times. And they think we'll get married or something like that. But their whole vision of each other is something that they can get for themselves. They're actually not really thinking about the other person at all. They're thinking how they're going to get something out of establishing that relationship. Then the relationship is established, and then after 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 2 to 3 months after the marriage, they may come to the realization, oh, this is actually a person. Oh, my God, I totally wasn't expecting this. And then you realize that you don't really like the person. And then, there's divorce or separation that goes on in the material world. So to see a person only as an object of what they can provide for you, it's called objectifying, it's called impersonalism, it's also called disrespectful, right? You can understand? That point is really clear, right? You can easily see it. So take it one step further to the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is also a person. He has his own desires for himself and desires for us as well, which are perfect because he happens to be God. He's also perfect. And we approach the Supreme Lord and we see him only as an object of object of our enjoyment, or we see him only in terms of what he can do for us. Such a mentality is disrespectful, right? He can fulfill our desires, or even like this, bring it down a level to devotees. We look upon devotees oftentimes as not perhaps in the deepest spirit of service, but more in terms of what they can provide for us. Oh, I'm feeling anxiety, let me go to the devotee. Right? I'm not saying that shouldn't be done per se, but the mentality is not exactly right either. Oh, I'm feeling disturbed, let me go to the devotee because he can pacify me, right? Oh, I'm feeling hungry, they're making nice prasadam, let me go to the temple, to the devotees and get some prasadam because I'm feeling hungry. So you see the center of the whole concept is I, right? I, me, mine. And then to try to interact with another living entity with a strong conception of I, me, mine is actually disrespectful. Although that's what's going on in the material world, and it doesn't seem like it's at all, it seems like natural, right? To interact with one another with the idea of what's in it for me seems very natural. They even write songs about it, right? I think I mentioned this, Janet Jackson, don't mind. She said, wrote a song that was very popular called What Have You Done For Me Lately? and that's the whole mentality, right? No matter, devotees may be getting gallons and gallons and gallons of blood. Let's take it a step higher to the Supreme Lord. He's given us this whole material world. Fresh air, an operational body, a brain, hopefully. Sometimes it might be questionable for some of the living entities. He's given us senses by which we can understand what's going on in the material world, a mind, unfortunately in that one sense, that can kind of analyze the information the senses are pulling in and so on. And we approach the Supreme Lord and our only prayer is, what have you done for me lately? Right? That's our whole mood, our whole attitude. And such an attitude is greatly disrespectful. It's against the principles of pure devotion to the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada quotes this verse from Gita, Chatur Vidabhajanti Mam, discussing 4 types of Sukriti, Jana, Sukriti, Narjuna. 4 types of persons who come to Krishna. Those who are distressed, those who are inquisitive, those who are in search of some material remuneration, and those who are searching knowledge of Krishna. These are called as Sukriti, pious persons. Pious persons because they've come to the Supreme Lord. But generally, they're not devotees. Although they approach Vishnu for satisfying their material desires, whatever it may be, if one of these four categories or maybe a combination of the four. Although they approach Vishnu for that fulfillment, they are not called as devotees. Prabhupada is putting that language here in that purport. So we're going to stick with that language because that's what Prabhupada uses in this purport. That they're not called as devotees. And why is it that they're not called as devotees? Although they approach Vishnu, they also pray to Vishnu. They may even chant Vishnu's names, Krishna's names like that, but they're not called as devotees. And why is that? Because they're considering the Supreme Lord more or less an appendage to their karmic activity, right? Does that make sense? This is like the Karma Mimamsa philosophy. You know this Karma Mimamsa? Krishna preaches this Karma Mimamsa philosophy that Nanda Maharaj should convince him not to do the Govardhan, or to do Indra Puja. So this Karma Mimamsa philosophy says, basically it's atheism. And but they say, even if there is a Supreme Lord, this is the essence, even if there is a Supreme Lord, He is the bestower of the fruits of my activities. So if I do some good activities, He bestows the good results. If I do some bad activities, He bestows the bad results. And since He's just the bestower of my activities, He's actually dependent upon what I'm doing, right? So therefore, God is not independent. If I do something, He must bestow the good result. If I do something bad, He will bestow the bad result. Because that is true in the case of the Devas. The Devas are called as attendants of karma. Just as a person's shadow follows them, you know, when you're walking, see, I can see my shadow. When your shadow moves with you. So similarly, when one performs proper worship of the Devatas through proper yagnas, then like a shadow that follows the person, the Devatas must give the proper result because they're bound by the laws of karma to do so. But the Supreme Lord is not such an entity. He's completely independent. He can do as He likes. That's probably why many people don't like to go to Krishna. Because like I was mentioning in the Bhagavad Gita class, somehow the soul intuitively knows that. Even if they haven't heard Bhagavad Gita or anything, somehow the soul intuitively knows Krishna is independent. Let me go to Ganesh. Let me go to Durga. Let me go to Shiva. Because I think something is there with Krishna. I think He's independent. He doesn't have to fulfill the desires. But for those who may approach Vishnu, they have this mentality very similar to Karma Mimamsa, where I am doing some particular activity, karma, and Krishna must give the result. In other words, He's just an appendage to my karmic activity. Krishna is not one to really be worshipped. He's more or less a facility for satisfying me. Does it make sense? Just like so this mentality, I don't know if they're like people who follow the Karma Mimamsa philosophy so much today, as a way of life per se, like a proclaimed, articulated way of life. I'm following Karma Mimamsa, but the mentality is certainly there. For a lot of one place you might see it is like the yoga studios. There's like a very subtle form of it. In the yoga studios, they also chant the names of Krishna. They may even chant the Maha Mantra and so on. It's becoming very popular in America. They even have a thing called the American Kirtan movement. And oftentimes, if you go, don't go. If you happen to somehow pass by one of these things, when they are describing the mantras to the people, because they usually give some little talk before they chant the mantra, they oftentimes, I've been to a couple of them in the very outset of my Krishna consciousness life, because one devotee here, he was doing a teacher's yoga training thing, and he was getting it for free, but he had to bring prasadam to all their events. So sometimes he would bring prasadam, and we would be engaged in helping him to bring that. So I've been to a couple of these events. And when they would describe the mantras to worship Krishna, they would describe Krishna basically as a concept. It's not that Krishna is actually real. Don't make that mistake. He's not actually real. He's just a concept to help you become peaceful. Something to help you become focused and relaxed and then ultimately merge into everyone in the room, because that was their whole idea. We're all one, and we're going to merge with one another through chanting Hare Krishna. I don't want that result. I don't even like that person over there. Anyway, like Maharaj, Srila Rompa Maharaj often tells a story about a person talking about chanting and say you become one with the name, you know. In the beginning it's you and the name, and then after you continue chanting for some time, then it's just the name. And Maharaj, he had the consciousness, even at that, it was before he met the devotees, but he had the consciousness at that time, yeah, this is atheism. He could understand by dint of, obviously, his pure devotional impressions. So he didn't accept that. So this is a contamination of karma mimamsa philosophy. Krishna is an appendage to what I'm doing. He's just a concept to help me become peaceful, like that, a facility to help me become happy. Right, so then the devotees, we may also come to the Krishna with that attitude. And our karma is called vandanam, right? We offer prayer. But prayer is more or less a karmic activity. It's not a devotional activity. Here Prabhupada is mentioning the priests, they know very well the difference between karma and bhakti. So the karma mimamsakas, they also offer prayer. They worship Vishnu. Even the Mayavadis do that. They have this thing called Pancha Upasaka worship, where they worship 5 deities, the impersonal Vishnu. I don't even know what that means, the impersonal Vishnu. But there's a Murti of Vishnu, a Murti of Durga, a Murti of Shiva, a Murti of Ganesh, and I think Surya also. It's called 5 deities that they worship in Mayavad philosophy. And their idea is that because we're embodied, we're not able to focus on the all-pervasive, qualityless, formless Brahman. So therefore, we need some form to help us meditate. But then in the perfection of your meditation, bye-bye Ganesh, bye-bye Shiva, bye-bye Durga, bye-bye Vishnu, you know, they may throw the deities on the ground or just neglect them or throw them in the water, and now I'm vimukta maninas, I'm liberated. And Maya, this is the last line of Maya. Maya's like, yes, you are liberated. She encourages them, yes, you are liberated. And then next body. It continues, you know, the cycle of birth and death. So this is not Vaishnavism, this is not a devotional life. The language that's used by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he calls it Vida Vaishnava Dharma, or which has 2 divisions, Vida Karma Vaishnava Dharma, which I just explained, like Karma Mimamsaka, and Jnana Vida Jnana Vaishnava Dharma, which is like the Mayavada understanding. So they also chant the names of Krishna, they worship Krishna, they do all various ceremonies. They may look like sadhakas. Some of them even look like devotees. I don't want to mention the name because someone might be attached to this group. But it's a popular group. They have very beautiful temples all over the world. I may give you an indication. And they look exactly like devotees. Like their tilak is usually not, is the only thing that's a little bit different. But their saffron, their hairdo, they even wear kanti mala. When you see them, they look just like devotees. But their whole understanding is impersonal. So it's not at all devotional. And therefore they're not called as devotees. So Prabhupada is making that point here. Although they may approach the Lord out of these 4 reasons mentioned by Krishna in the Gita, they're called as pious, but they're not called as devotees in the language Prabhupada is using, because their conception of Krishna is all incorrect. Because they have a disrespectful mentality towards Krishna, they're not called as devotees. Right? And the disrespect is Krishna is simply existing for me. Right? I'm the center, and Krishna's to move around my in an orbit around me. So such a disrespectful mentality does not make them devotees. So how do they become devotees then? How is it possible to become devotees? And for those of us who may recognize such a mentality is also there within ourselves, the tendency to approach the Supreme Lord or His devotees with a tendency to extract something from them and then go away. Then how do we actually become devotees? What does it mean to be a devotee? Devotional service means, Prabhupada quotes here, Anya Abhilashita Shunyam Gana Karmadinavritam. The beginning of this mentality, how does it mention it in Chaitanya Charitamrita? Shraddha Shabde Vishwashakahe Shuddhajanishchaye. Krishna Bhakti, Kaila Karma, Sarva Karma Kritahoy. This verse is there. This is the beginning of the pure devotional consciousness. That faith, just by approaching Krishna, everything can be satisfied. That doesn't mean I have material desires, let me approach Krishna to satisfy my material desires. That's not their understanding. Like this verse, akama sarvo kama va moksha kama udaridihi tirena bhakta yogena yajeta purusham param, right? If you are desireless, akama means desireless. Actually, this is just a side point. The word kama means desire. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says of all the syllables, he's the letter a, a. So the word akama means desire for Krishna, right? We generally probably just translate desireless. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says this thing. The word akama means the intense desire, kama, for Krishna, the letter. That's cool. Whether you're akama or you're sarvakama, so many desires in the heart for material sense gratification, or you're moksha kama, in all cases, if you're broad-minded, you have broad intelligence, udaridihi, then you should approach the Supreme Lord and worship Him purely. It doesn't mean I have material desires. That means approach the Supreme Lord to get my material desires. It means that whether you're contaminated or you're not contaminated, you should perform pure devotional service to Krishna and become free from material contamination. And the understanding is that's, in other words, you should perform bhakti. And the basic criteria for devotion to Krishna is faith. And what is the faith? That just by bhakti to Krishna, everything is satisfied without having to endeavor for it separately. This is bhakti. Though I don't have to think about my so many material desires that I want to be fulfilled. Krishna knows, and He's probably not going to fulfill them. Or He'll fulfill them after you don't want them anymore. That's how it usually tends to work. He knows. You don't have to think about those things. Okay, I'm contaminated, I'm fallen, right? I often in recent times been expressing a little hopelessness every now and again when I see how contaminated the heart is. But put that aside. I'm totally contaminated. Worship Krishna with pure devotion, according to the pure devotional principles given through the Mahajans, the Sampradaya. Then you worship Krishna, and everything will be satisfied. This basic faith is the qualification for real devotion to Krishna, which is pure devotion to Krishna. Unless you qualify devotion to Krishna, devotee of Krishna means pure devotion to Krishna, pure devotee of Krishna. And the basic element, you can say spiritual element, that qualifies a person for devotion is his faith. Now that faith has three divisions. It can be weak, it can be determined, Komala Shraddha, Dhrida Shraddha. It can be very profound. The Kanishta Adhikari's faith is called as Komala. The next category, Madhyam Adhikari, his faith is called as determined, Dhrida Shraddha. And the Uttama Adhikari is like, his faith is completely profound. But in either case, they all have the pure devotional faith that just by worshiping Krishna, everything will be satisfied. So this category, this is an interesting thing. This is mentioned in Nectar of Devotion. Chaturvida bhajante mam jnasukriti narjuna arto jignasu tartigani. These four divisions have different personalities that exemplify each of these wants. Right? For the person in distress, Gajendra is used as the example. For the persons who are inquisitive, the stages of Naimisharanya are given as the example. For the persons who are wanting some material remuneration, Dhruva Maharaj is given as the example. And for the Gyanis, the Kumars are given as the example, right? And this is mentioned in Nectar Devotion, this is far out. None of them qualified as devotees in the context of, because they didn't have the minimum pure devotional faith. That I don't have to separately pursue my material desires and using Krishna more or less as an appendage to that, but that just by worshiping Krishna, I will be satisfied. Let me just leave aside these other desires. Because they didn't even have the Komala Shraddha, then they didn't qualify, at least we can say for Shuddha Bhakti, or we can say for Bhakti, because Bhakti really means for Shuddha Bhakti. They didn't really qualify as devotees using the language of Srila Prabhupada in this purport. So how do you get the adhikar for devotion? So that was mentioned in the previous verse, only by sadhu sangha. Through sadhu sangha, through their shila and their shiksha, their instructions and their behavior, you come to get the understanding that improvement in material life has nothing to do with spiritual. It has nothing to do with worship of God. And through that continuous sadhu sangha, you get the shraddha that is required to enter into the house of bhakti and at least be counted as a Kanishta Adhikari neophyte devotee. The devotee knows I need not approach the Supreme Lord for anything. I only need worship Him and everything else will be satisfied. And as he makes progress with that faith, then his material desires become crushed progressively. All of that is made possible by the mercy of devotees, by connecting to sadhu sangha in a real way and maintaining the connection. All of this is made possible. Only through sadhu sangha, this is the essence of the teachings, that through sadhu sangha you can become a devotee. Otherwise, not at all possible, no hope. There's no hope at all. Without the connection of sadhu sangha, whatever we do is actually karma. There is a verse is Anukuyena Krishna Anushilanam. I often tell like this point because that's how I learned it. I read it like this, studied it. That there's Krishna and there's Shilanam. The Shilanam means the activities of devotion towards Krishna, rendered with our body, mind, and words. They connect to Krishna only through the parampara. So the word anu refers to the parampara. Anushilanam means continuously serving Krishna, but the word anu also means to follow. Our activities connect to Krishna by connecting to the bona fide sadhus in the civil succession, the spiritual master. Then our activities enter into the realm of devotion. Now, as neophyte devotees, we may have weak faith, and therefore we feel like sometimes that itch is there to try out an independent program or to use Krishna as a facility for something else. That itch will be there until we make a little bit of progress, but as we're being accosted by our material desires, we should not fall into the trick of pursuing them, but rather we should hold on tightly to the feet of our superiors, the spiritual master and the sadhus, and under their protection, tolerate the itch and continue to move forward. It is always that itch will be there for some time. Just like you ever had the experience in your hand itch, you should try this exercise because Prabhupada said you have to tolerate the itch. So have you ever tried doing that? Like where your hand itch and you try tolerating it? Just as an exercise in that consciousness, tolerating the itch. It's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Woo! Woo! Actually, it starts to like suck up your consciousness because actually you can easily do it if you really focus on Krishna. And I had this experience when on the altar. Sometimes like your arm itches, but you're holding a ghee lamp, and you can't just like put the ghee lamp down and go, whoo, and continue to worship. You have to continue worshiping Krishna. And I had this experience many times. All the times you just focus on the worship of Krishna, it goes away while you're like focused on the worship of Krishna. Or sometimes for pujaris, we know about this, having to go to the bathroom all of a sudden. That's a great misery. And before you actually start the worship of Krishna, it's super intense sometimes. You're like, man, I really got to go to the bathroom, but there's just not enough time. And, you're running here and there. And then right when you start the worship, it's like it goes away. And you're just like into the worship, And then as soon as you finish the worship, immediately the conscience, boom, bathroom, you have to run. So it's in other words, my point is, it's very hard to tolerate an itch. And I was there, a bathroom, that was really hard. No, let's use the example of an itch. That's the example that Prahlad Maharaj gives, especially in relationship to sex desire. It's like an itch. And sometimes the tendency is when your hand itching, you like try to tolerate, try to exercise out. The tendency is like, oh, don't do it. Okay, just a little. Our materialistic mentality, you just get it a little bit, Okay, that'll do a little bit more. And then before you know, you're caught up. Okay, whew. Itches are like that. But if you can, in other words, you can tolerate an itch by just redirecting your energy towards the services of Guru and Krishna. We have to try our very best to hang on to that absorption. Otherwise, the itches of material desires actually suck up all our consciousness, and then we're pulled out of the realm of bhakti and into the realm of karma. But if we can hold on to the feet of our superiors, then we can remain in the realm of bhakti even though the itches are there. And by holding on to their lotus feet, we'll continue to move forward. If anything, by their mercy, they're dragging us. Right? They're dragging us along the way. Like Srila Prabhupada's purport in the 6th chapter, I think, of the 1st canto, when Narada Muni's mother is bitten by a snake. And he thought that to be the mercy of the Lord. And Prabhupada's purport is that this is how the Supreme Lord drags a sincere soul back home, back to Godhead. So even though there may be some itches of material desires there, if we can remain, hang on to the feet of our superiors who are so merciful, then by their mercy and their combined mercy of Krishna and Guru, sadhus, then the itches are there, they'll drag us along. until we evolve ourselves and are situated in Krishna consciousness. So the Brahmanas are expressing regret. We could get into the importance of expressing regret for disrespect. I didn't want to elaborate on that point so much, but that's an important thing that could probably be considered also. That just like now as sadhakas, we may regret our materialistic habits, right? Like sometimes, for some people, it may have been, going to CNN. I think Indians, particularly, they many times express this, like giving up news was like very difficult. I found that to be extraordinary, because I was like, news. But for some people, giving up news was very extraordinary. It's like very difficult. The news. And one devotee asked me, "Prabhu, I have a problem with the CNN or something like that." I said, "Why don't you just stop?" It's like a travesty to even consider such a thing. And for some others, our habits may be even a little bit more degraded, more in the mode of ignorance. And sometimes when we think about those things, we regret. So in a similar way, when looking upon the Supreme Lord in terms of our enjoyment, while we're doing that, generally you can't regret because your consciousness is stolen by Maya. Maya prahita jnana, right? Kamashtashtera hita jnana. Our consciousness is actually stolen by Maya. And therefore, while you're usually associating with a personality in terms of your own sense of enjoyment, you can't regret that time because you're in Maya. But when you get away from that situation, oftentimes you can reflect. And, maybe it's important to try to regret, like that's not the proper, mentality. I should rather, understanding what the proper mentality is, I should rather seek strength from deepening our sadhu sangha and deepening our application of the principles of pure devotion. And in that way, we don't have to regret. And also, the Supreme Lord doesn't have to regret. When the so-called devotee prays for his own material desires, the Lord also regrets that. This is mentioned specifically in the 6th canto, in the 9th chapter, where the Devatas are praying to Vishnu to appear so that he can kill Vitrasura. That's their whole idea. And they offer really beautiful prayers, like amazing, like pure devotion. And when Vishnu appears, he says, anyone who hears these prayers, they will develop pure devotion for me. That's how wonderful their prayers were. But then he goes on to chastise them. Why didn't you not pray for bhakti? Why are you praying for material desires, for me to kill Vitrasura? And Prabhupada comments in the purport, the Supreme Lord regretted that, they offered this deep prayer, like a deep sadhana, and they wanted something very paltry. It's like, a mother, who trained her son up to be very cultured and sophisticated, and he marries like a ghetto girl. Excuse my language. That's how I grew up, so don't mind. I can speak like this. I have the liberty. He marries. In other words, he marries like a very uncultured. At least in her estimation. Oh, here's a practical example. An Indian boy marries a Westerner. Yes. I know. I have friends like that, They're Indian mothers, they see their Indian sons marry a Western girl. And, the mothers lament, definitely. They lament greatly. Isn't it? Yeah. They lament greatly. So it's something like that. I trained you up, in their estimation, to be a good boy, a cultured boy, and all you married was a Western girl? They can't handle it, So similarly, we approach the Supreme Lord, we've done like a deep sadhana, deep practices of devotional service, and all we want is something paltry. The Supreme Lord is like, oh my God, how regrettable. So we don't want to make the Lord cry like that. We rather want to bring happiness to Him and also to our predecessors and do the real thing for the real reason and get the real result. Okay, I'll end there. Are there any things anyone wants to add on? Anything? I did the best I could. Okay.
So in the beginning you were talking about people seeing women as like what they can do for myself.
That was an example. Yeah.
But is it the right? You can correct me if I'm wrong. but is it the right attitude to have where one is saying, what can I do for, if someone is in a marriage relationship, if they say, what can I do for how can I please my wife, rather than how can I please myself? Because it's confusing to know if this is the right way, because we should, our ultimate goal is to please Krishna, but yet in a marriage relationship, it appears that a husband must be very mindful of the desires of his wife and vice versa.
I don't know if I would express it the same way, that he should be mindful of the desires of his wife. Because, if she's not a pure devotee, that can be dangerous. But I would rather express it as be mindful of his responsibility in service to Krishna, right? He's entered into the family ashram, right? And the fact it's not that he should be thinking so much, my wife, my kids. That's a materialistic consciousness. But rather, these are servants of Krishna. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he prays in Sharanagati that he sees his wife as like one of the gopis and his home as Goloka Vrindavan, and he's rendering service accordingly. So he's not just maintaining his wife and kids, but he's maintaining devotees of Krishna. He's maintaining the Dham of Krishna, his house, which he's serving Krishna in, and so on. So we have our various responsibilities in service to Krishna. So we should always be mindful of our responsibility in conducting our services to Krishna. So those services are being conducted from certain position in life. Someone's in the Brahmacharya ashram, someone's in the Grihastha ashram, someone's in the Sannyasa ashram, like that. And they have their various responsibilities in service to Krishna, right? And it should be seen in that context. So then if a Grihastha is like absorbed in, like Chandramali Maharaj, he was just here, he was telling us that one devotee, Mataji, she came to Chandramali Swami one day and she was crying, practically speaking. And she said, Maharaj, my husband just reached Chaitanya Charitamrita all day. He doesn't talk to me. Maybe he gets up for prasadam, eats, and then goes back to Chaitanya Charitamrita. So she was a little bit frustrated. And then Maharaj said that marriage didn't last very long. I mean, can you imagine? A whole day. And the wife wants to talk, she wants to do things. Don't disturb. I'm absorbed in Krishna right now. But no, a part of your absorption in Krishna is consideration of your responsibility to Krishna's devotees, which may be identified as wife and children and other such. They may have what is called as a vyavaharika type of identification, like a social consideration. But the real thing is that they're spirit souls. They're also servants of Krishna. Krishna has placed you in that association for your purification. There are rules or dharma that govern those relationships, and we should be mindful of those rules in our services to Krishna. So in other words, it won't be as confusing. There's always going to be a little confusion. But it won't be as confusing if we know what is the dharma in that particular ashram. The dharma means the rules that govern the relationship, right? So it's not the dharma. For example, this is just an example. In the Western culture, they have the way they usually interact with their wives. They say things like, hi, sweetie, honey, all these things are going on. But that's not exactly dharma. In Vedic culture, they didn't so much interact with the wife in a very sensual way because they knew that would pollute the consciousness. And when you have to go to things like having children and so on, if you have that enjoying consciousness, you give birth to Hiranyakashipus and Hiranyakshas. It's like a problem. So then they wouldn't so much interact in a very sensual way with one another. There were rules that governed the relationship. So, or you didn't embrace your wife, especially in public, they're wifey, and you're ecstatic to see that. Or if you go to the airport sometimes and you see the wife is coming back up the long time, her husband, and they're embracing, they're kissing, and it's that's not dharma, That may be your wife, but that's not how you're supposed to act in relationship to the wife. There are rules that govern that. So we are mindful of our responsibilities in a certain situation or within a certain relationship, then that will make things less confusing. And we're fulfilling our obligation to Krishna. And to those living entities who are also helping us.
Is it being small-minded if you're thinking, well, how can I please others versus, well, I'm not married, but if I was, is it small-minded to think like, I want to help others, or is it, oh well, they're just jivas, and I'm just serving Krishna, and I'm helping them, but I'm doing it for Krishna.
Yeah, no, that can be like an impersonal mentality. It is not that we're like totally removed. Like Srila Prabhupada teaches in chapter 13, verses 8 through 12, when Krishna teaches that one should be detached from wife, home, children, and the rest. You've seen this purport? So Prabhupada says in the purport, it is not that one should have no affection for them. Prabhupada says that, it's not that someone may think like that. It's not that one should have no affection. It's that one should not be too attached if it's going to impede his progress in Krishna consciousness. Something to that effect Prabhupada says. So the idea that there's certainly affection, that is natural also. Prabhupada says that it is natural. There will be natural affection that's there because the relationship is established. But we have to make sure that affection is expressed through Dharma. Because oftentimes there's a term in the Bhagavatam, what is sneha pashayar, the ropes of affection. Right? So oftentimes the rope of affection binds a person to samsara. Right? Like philanthropy, altruism, that's one example of it. Another example is Arjuna's compassionate argument, which Krishna did not approve of, right? And why didn't Krishna approve of that? The compassionate argument of Arjuna, right? Arjuna was like, I don't want to fight out of compassion for them. And Krishna didn't appreciate that compassion. It was compassion. It was material compassion. It was compassion. But Krishna didn't appreciate it. Why? Because it was not expressed through Dharma. So it is natural to have affection for other living entities. But we have to make sure that we express that affection through Dharma, through the codes Krishna has given. Otherwise, that affection quickly turns the opposite way, an aversion, when it's not according to the rules of Dharma. When it's according to sentiment, it quickly goes the other way, because it's on the mental platform, right? They have a saying that in America, they marry the girl that they love. I think Gandhi is coined for quoting this. And in America, or Western countries, they marry the girl that they love. In India, they love the girl that they marry. Understand? You see, it's a subtle difference, right? In America, it's all emotion. Everybody needs somebody sometimes, and various songs are there. Nobody wants to be lonely, etc. And people hear that nonsense, and then they get, it comes in the heart. And so you try to establish a relationship based on emotions alone. So someone quickly is attached, but it quickly turns sour, and then there's separation. Whereas in the other paradigm, Dharma is governing the relationship. And then within Dharma, they learn how to mature their affection on a religious platform and from a religious platform to a spiritual platform. So there's nothing wrong with having affection for living entities. But we have to make sure it's expressed in the way that Krishna has told if we don't want it to go south. And if we try to express our affection outside the way Krishna has told, it's going to lead to sorrow. Sooner or later, it will lead to sorrow. So that's my understanding of that particular point. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that. Yes, it's another Prabhu in there. Okay, Jagannath Prabhu.
Maharaj describes in the Grihastha Ashram lectures that the common mistake that Grihasthas make is that they think that there are three entities, meaning the husband and the wife, they take turns in switching between the master and the servant, and the Krishna is the third person. But Maharaj was describing that actually there are only two, Krishna and then the servants. So the object of the service, so the devotion is to Krishna, but the expression may be extended to the husband or the wife. So if that is the consciousness, then when you say dharmically firstly, then there is room for definitely for pleasing the husband or the wife. Yeah. One can just... So Krishna's system is such that Grihastha ashram, if it is properly followed within that small unit, there is, all the 5 items: Vaishnava Seva, chanting the holy name together, Shravanam Kirtanam, worshipping the deity, and making the place Golok Vrindavan. All those 5 potent items are there. So one can go back home, back to Godhead. But it is not just a fulfilling of, the vicarious desires. It has to be based on Guru and Krishna. And that is extended to not just Grihastha ashram, but anyone.
Everywhere.
So, yeah, definitely. We want to please Vaishnavas. That's our goal. We want to serve Vaishnavas and please Vaishnavas. That's our ticket back home, back to God.
The question began with, should one please one's wife? And my answer is absolutely. Otherwise one would not survive. And that is survival technique. You have to. You have to. Otherwise it's called Atmaha. In your question, when you were saying, should one help others, should one help one's wife or husband, if the understanding of the word help, or what is the feature of help, if that is clear, then yes, it has place. If that help doesn't have proper definition, then it is risky. It's very dangerous. If my wife or my son or daughter or my family member or my friend wants to engage in some sense gratification that sounds dharmic, today's topic was dharma, and I help that, then I have not done my duty. Or I have actually hurt the person more than helping. So what does help really mean? So we cannot give a blanket answer saying yes or no. What does the help really mean? And therefore it needs to be considered. And that consideration is not easy because Krishna describes, this is one of my favorite verses from Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Kavayo api atra mohita. Even the greatest learned persons are confused as to what is the right thing to do in any circumstance. They're very confused. So it means that one cannot rely only on one's intelligence or one's experience to say this is the right thing to do. One must approach someone with higher vision to know what is help, how to help in the best way.
So in the realm of spiritual care, so the question to always ask is, what is the motivation? Is it my desire to be a helper, or does this person really needs help? So what am I fulfilling? So many times, especially those of us who are extending care. So it could be about us actually, that I need to feel that I am the helper. So it may not even be about the other person. Then things really get mixed up. Then one doesn't even know like detached caring. So that's another aspect. I have a question.
Sure.
If we can switch topics.
Sure.
Okay. So you were discussing about how, the sages here, how they're expressing their regret that they're asking for something, paltry, for the Supreme Lord. And then our Acharyas also discuss that, for a Vaishnava, one of the aspects of, the real regret is to pursue Krishna consciousness, or continue to pursue Krishna consciousness, or reinstate oneself, knowing that one has fallen down, then reinstating oneself. So, at least to me it seems that since I'm not fully there, but I can even fully my regret is not full. So it seems like the reinstatement is also not full. So it seems like one may have to go through many of these cycles of regret and reinstatement before one actually comes to the full understanding. Is that fair? Or, as practicing devotees, what can we actually really expect?
Yeah, I think you said it. We know that before the stage of fixed faith, Dridha Shraddha, which is also called the stage of Nishta, there's a stage of Anartha Nivritti. And what we've heard it oftentimes is hills and valleys. So then there's the regret, and then falling down, and regret, and falling down. And it goes on some time until we attain a stage of maturity in our faith in Krishna. So that is fair to expect. It's important for any practicing devotee to evaluate his Krishna consciousness regularly. Bhaktivinoda Thakur instructs us in this way. So the tendency is to go along with the flow. And that's what we call niyamagraha, right? Just carrying on the activities without any consciousness. So it's important for any type of practitioner to evaluate. And then in that evaluation process, there might be some regret that comes up, but due to not being situated properly, again falls down, again regretting, again falls down, and it goes on. But he's actually coming closer to the mark. It doesn't look like it, but he's actually improving through that process of falling down, and he's improving, and his faith is maturing actually through that process, although it doesn't appear that way. I'm trying to think of a good example. I remember a story that we would hear about, perhaps someone can tell it, about a man who was drinking ghee. It's to cure some type of, how does that story goes? That's the first thing that's coming to my mind, but I don't remember the exact story. This is a good example of this.
There was a person who was suffering from severe indigestion.
Yes.
And he visited an Ayurveda doctor. So the doctor told him, every day drink a whole cup of ghee. And he said, he went to the doctor and said, I'm not able to retain any food. Whatever I eat, I throw up. So doctor said, every day drink a cup of ghee for 1 month and come back. So he went back after a month, and the doctor asked him, so how are you doing? He said, I threw up all the ghee every day. So the doctor said, very good. Now every day 2 cups of ghee for another month. And he said, you must be kidding me. I'm throwing everything up. He said, no, just do this. So the next 1 month were 2 cups of ghee, and he was throwing everything out again. He came back. So the doctor said, now 3 cups. So this is really intense. No, just do this.
Are you a doctor?
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to be a Brahmana, but what is this one? And 3 months later when he came back, the doctor asked him, how are you doing? He said, I'm feeling fantastic. I'm feeling all cured up. So can you please tell me how, if I'm throwing up, you asked me to do the same thing? And he said, every time you took a cup of ghee and you threw it out, a little remained inside. And over 3 months, there was sufficient ghee in your body that facilitated a good digestive power or something like that. So
that's a good story. So that's my point. So through the process of hills and valleys, going through that, actually a person is improving, provided he's under proper guidance, and he's also evaluating his Krishna consciousness. And then he's actually improving through that and getting better. Then all of a sudden, a more healthy stage, fixed faith arises. And then he moves progressively onward from there. So I think that's fair to expect, right? That's my understanding. I don't know if that satisfies the... Okay. It's already 8:30, so I'm going to have to close it out here. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.